Hello and welcome to the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, the UK's largest professional union for prison, correctional and secure psychiatric workers with over 33,000 members. In this episode, we look at the interaction between the union and the Prison Service Pay Review Body, the body who for more than 20 years has been making recommendations on prison service pay to the government of the day. The prison service is not unique in having a pay review body, but the POA differs in one key regard from other unions whose members' pay is subject to a pay review body recommendation. This is because, apart from in Scotland, the union is legally debarred from taking industrial action if and when it feels that is necessary. Shortly before the recent parliamentary reception to commemorate 30 years since the loss of the union's right to strike, I sat down with General Secretary Steve Gillan to talk about the politics of the Prison Service Pay Review Body, where it came from, how it operates, and why organisations like the International Labour Organization have expressed such deep concern about the way it works. General Secretary Steve Gillan, the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994 is well known by all POA activists, probably all POA members, because Section 127 took away the right for the union to take industrial action. But when the government, the then Conservative government, introduced that piece of legislation, they proposed an alternative to the right to strike. What was that mechanism and how did the union view it at the time?
Well, what actually happened, it wasn't until 1997 that actually the compensatory mechanism was looked at by the Blair government, and we didn't have a lot of time for the Blair government because they lied on privatisation of the prison service, saying that they'd reversed that decision, and they said that they'd give us our rights back on the right to strike, and they reneged on that. So we'd campaigned actually since 1994 until the year 2001, and then they introduced the pay review body as a compensatory mechanism. And I distinctly remember the very first pay review body chair. It was a guy called Sir Toby Freer. He gave us, or recommended actually to government at that time, a 6.3% pay rise. And they decided then they wouldn't pay it all at once, they'd stage it. So that was our first argument with government about staging the pay rise back then. And it continued. Sir Toby Freer, by the way, was removed from his post very quickly because I think he was independent, actually, and they didn't really want anybody independent. They wanted their own people in there. And that's exactly what happened all the way along until Tim Fletcher became the chair most recently. And we stopped giving evidence at one point to the pay review body because we just decided as a conference, actually, that they weren't independent. They were just doing government's bidding for them. So, in effect, they were selected by government, they were paid by government, and they'd done government's bidding for them.
The union took the government to the International Labour Organization in the early 2000s, and the ILO gave a ruling that absolutely supported the union's position, as I recall.
Yeah, and in fact, they supported our position on a couple of occasions, actually, but there was actually no adequate compensatory mechanisms. I mean, I suppose the kick in the teeth was that the ILO actually did say that a government can restrict a trade union, but if it chooses to restrict a trade union, if it's deemed to be an essential service, then they've got to have adequate compensatory mechanisms in place that has the confidence of the injured party, so to speak. And we are the injured party, which we still say is a breach of international law on a basic fundamental human right. And the ILO agreed with us in many respects, and we're still not, even today, got adequate compensatory mechanisms for not having the right to strike. And government continue to interfere with the recommendations and the outcomes of pay review bodies.
Reading up on this a little bit before we've had this discussion, it seems to me that the ILO decision was based on the fact that the government was not obliged to accept the recommendations of the pay review body. And the government of the day said, oh, that's not true. We will accept the recommendations, and then carried on not accepting the recommendations.
Yeah,
It was a
absolutely.
bizarre situation.
Yeah, and that's what led us to make a further application to the European Court of Human Rights. And our application took 2 years to be heard. And that was all about government reneging, again, on a recommendation by the pay review body to give a £3,000 consolidated increase to fair and sustainable grades. They said it wasn't affordable. So they reneged on that. So we made an application to all the courts here, and we got rejected by the courts here. So we made an application to the European Court of Human Rights, and they've accepted our application. So we now await constructive discussions with government in relation to resolving this issue. And the easiest way to resolve it, actually, is to restore our right to strike and restore collective bargaining instead of relying on the pay review body.
Now, of course, POA conference decided that this wasn't worth participating in about 2015, I think. But then 5 or 6 years later, there was a change of heart. What provoked the change of heart?
Well, there was a meeting between myself and Tim Fletcher, the new chair of the pay review body. And it was Chatham House rules, so I won't go into detail of what happened, but enough happened in that discussion that led me to believe that I was dealing with a man of principle and actual fact honesty. And that impressed me, to be honest with you. And he said that the missing link from the table was the POA, because they had to take at face value what the government and employer were actually saying without challenge. So we decided as an executive to tentatively go back and give evidence. And I've got to say, since we've been given evidence again, I've been pretty impressed by the pay review body and the recommendations, because they've actually been forthright and even challenged government on occasions publicly, which I've got to say I was quite pleased about, and will continue at the moment until they let us down again, or indeed replace the chair, because that's what they tend to do when they disagree with a chair of the pay review body. They tend to remove them.
In the meantime, the outcome from the union's re-engagement with the pay review body has brought real benefits for members.
Well, I think it has over a couple of years, but nothing will ever replace restorative pay. So of the years that government tampered, i.e. with pay freezes for public sector workers, effectively not keeping up with inflation as well, nothing will ever replace that. And we still await that restorative pay. So although in the last couple of years they've given or recommended, and it's been accepted, pretty much decent pay rises to try and keep pace with inflation, in many regards, we're still way behind that restorative pay.
Strategic aim of achieving a restoration of the right to strike, a restoration of collective bargaining, restorative pay is there. But in the meantime, the day-to-day reality means it's better to engage and get at least something for the members. But I think it's not just the value, is it? It's the timing of when the recommendations are implemented and the money is paid to members. That's also an issue, isn't it?
Well, it's a massive issue. I mean, it's crept in for probably the last sort of 8-9 years, where prison officer grades are supposed to, as a compensatory mechanism, receive a pay rise in April each year. But every year it's been delayed until at least September, October time, because they do all the pay review bodies for different sectors all at the same time. But my argument is all those sectors who have a pay review body still have the right to strike. So if they disagree with the outcome of the pay review body, they can still ballot the members for strike action. The POA can't. So my argument is, if it's a compensatory mechanism, then it should be dealt with on time, and prison officer grades should get the pay rise in April, not after that.
Yeah, it's a question of respect, I guess, isn't it, really? And in terms of the right to take industrial action, that still exists, of course, for POA members in Scotland and we don't see that the walls have come tumbling down or there's panic in the streets because of that change, that different legal position.
Well, you're 100% right. And this is our argument, and we'll deal with that in our campaign. We've got a parliamentary reception on the 21st of October where we will continue to articulate our argument in relation to the right to strike. And you're absolutely right to mention Scotland in this, and the sky hasn't caved in, because the Scottish government restored the right to strike in 2015. And guess what? Actually, industrial relations in Scotland have actually improved, not deteriorated.
Assistant General Secretary Andy Baxter is the full-time officer responsible for preparing the union's submission to the Prison Service Pay Review Body. This is a detailed and time-consuming task, but one that is vital in terms of getting the best outcome for members. So Andy Baxter, Assistant General Secretary, part of your day-to-day work, if I can put it that way, is to actually put together the union's submissions to the Prison Service Pay Review Body. I mean, that sounds like quite a task, drawing in information from across the union, making it into a coherent submission. How long does that whole process take?
We start the work round about now, probably the back end of this month, certainly into October. We start the work. We look to draw as much evidence as we can. We work with the NEC, take the steer from the NEC to work out what their priorities are, where they want things to go for any particular submission. One of the biggest problems is, obviously, we had a two-tier pay model, and there are over 72 separate pay points or pay issues within the current pay scales. You really have to draw in evidence for managers, for prison officers, for dog handlers, for people that volunteer for additional duties, for people that do tornado, things like that. So it is a case of starting early, trying to get as much as you can, as much information in, and deciding what the priorities for the submission are. And that decision clearly sits with the NEC.
And I think, Andy, when you say there are 72 different issues that are covered by any 1 year's review body interaction, that just gives an indication to members about the scale and the importance of the exercise. And of course, all the union submissions are circulated to branches and available on the website as branch circulars. So if you haven't had a look, listeners, at what a POA submission to the Prison Service Pay Review Body looks like, you can access it through the website. And I think you, like I, will be surprised just how wide-ranging and detailed it is.
That's right, and that fits into the thing about there being so many different interests, so many people. We try to do the best for everyone. We've seen the years of the two-tier pay model with F&S grades painfully slowly catching up with the old closed grade staff, and now the closed grade staff, those who can't opt in, they feel as though they're between a rock and a hard place. But in reality, I'm not sure if people are aware, there are only around about 120 closed grades still left that it's not financially viable to opt in. But as you have to try and represent everyone, and you have to try and bring the evidence to the table to prove to the peer review body why everybody needs a pay rise.
So the submission is drawn up. It's cleared through the NEC. It goes off to the PS Pay Review Body. When does it need to be submitted? Is it a set date each year? And what happens to it once it is submitted?
Yeah, it's they always try to have the submissions by the 1st of February. So last year they brought the submission date back, and it was brought back to the 31st of December. This year they're asking for it even earlier. Quite ironically, for 16 years, the government, HMPPS or MOJ or Treasury, they've failed to submit their evidence on time for 16 years. And that's the reason why the pay rise has always been implemented in October. We submit our evidence. The peer review body during the year go on sites, and they do visits. They go and see the staff working in prisons. They speak to our members. you can clearly see that the peer review body do listen to our members, and it's vital that when the peer review body come into prisons, our members engage and they're open, honest, and tell the peer review body how it is.
And at any stage, is the union, the NEC, and the full-time officers, are they called in? Do they have the opportunity to debate the submission and the issues with members of the prison service pay review body?
I wouldn't really call it debate. We get the opportunity to go and submit oral evidence. And the purpose of that session is for the peer review body. They've received the submission. They're looking at our arguments. They're looking at what we're trying to raise. That session is to allow them to ask us any questions about the submission, and it's also a last chance because it's done over a period of time, and the prison service is a very dynamic, fast-moving service. It's also a last chance to make any additional requests.
So we've got this deadline of February, December. The pay review body are doing their site visits and collecting evidence and going around and talking to POA members directly. There's the oral evidence. And when is there an output, or when should there be an output? 1st of April, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. It should be, the decision should go to government in time to allow government to, I'm not going to say accept or reject, because they should only divert away from the recommendations of the peer review body under exceptional circumstances. Obviously, in the past, that hasn't always been the case. It should go to government in time so that government can put the funding in place and have it implement on the 1st of April. It's never happened. It's never happened in the history of the peer review body. If
you're on the pay review body as a member, they must surely be frustrated at this. And it goes somewhere, I suppose, goes a long way to explaining why members have to wait so long for their pay rise each year.
Yeah, the peer review body are clearly as frustrated as us. Each year, there's always a section about why it's late. Who was late submitting their evidence, and every year, without fail, it's the official side that they either haven't supplied data, they haven't supplied their submission. It's never the POA. The POA strive, and we work some very long days. We collaborate as a group, myself, other FTOs and the NEC. We collaborate to get it to where it should be and get it in on time. We maybe have a couple of days slippage, but we've never, in my opinion, since we returned to giving evidence to the peer review body, we've never been the reason why the pay rise is late. That sits firmly with the employer and Treasury.
And Andy, is there anything that you see in, say, this year's report that throws up issues that are very clearly going to be in the mind of the pay review body for next year or the year after?
In the prison service, we have a thing called non-effective, and it's an amount of non-effective time built into profiles to cover training, sickness absence, annual leave. For years and years, the POA have campaigned that the non-effective, it's currently 20%, and we've campaigned that it needs to be a lot higher. The peer review body this year have stated that they think 20% is too low, and they think that 30% would be needed to be effective. So basically, they're telling us, as part of our submissions, in my opinion, we read that's the green flag for us to really challenge HMPPS on the non-effective and try and get that uplift. The other thing that is interesting, again, the POA over the last 3 years, each year we've submitted, we believe our OSG colleagues are working far too many unsociable hours because they have a lot of nights, and the nights repeat quite often. The peer review body have obviously taken on board our comments, because this year they've asked HMPPS to provide a breakdown by establishment on OSG unsociable hours working. So I think they're just two little examples of how the POA submissions affect the thinking of the peer review body.
So it would be wrong to see the pay review body as a blockage or hostile. It'd be wrong to see them as necessarily hostile to the union. In your experience, they are, to a certain extent, open-minded and recognise the key issues that the union's flagging to them.
Definitely. The POA don't regard the peer review body as hostile. The POA believe that this peer review body is probably the fairest that we've ever seen in the history of peer review bodies. You know, like I said earlier, government don't always implement what the peer review bodies say, but as far as we're concerned, the peer review bodies are making the right noises, and they're fighting to make it a safer, better service.
The last word goes to General Secretary Steve Gillan on whether the publication of the new employment bill offers any prospects for a positive change. So the parliamentary reception on the 21st of October coincides with the 30th anniversary of the loss of the right to strike. The government has now published its new employment bill. There's no explicit mention of industrial relations in the prison service in the bill, but there is a strong commitment in that bill to ongoing dialogue and consultation with all stakeholders, which must, of course, include the POA. Are you hopeful that there will be some constructive discussions with the current government as the employment bill consultative process rolls on?
Yeah, look, we welcome the employment bill. I think it's a major step forward. I think it's a brave decision by this Labour government. And of course, as long as the recommendations in it aren't watered down, then during this consultation period, we will continue to engage, but we'll be seeking amendments to that bill where we want that dialogue with government on repealing the pernicious piece of legislation that has afflicted our members for 30 years. It's as simple as that. We believe it's a breach of international law. We believe it's a basic fundamental human right. And we look for this government to actually acknowledge that, yes, it's long gone past the time where this pernicious piece of legislation needs to be repealed. So we look forward to that dialogue, and I'd welcome that dialogue, but it's not started as yet.
Thank you very much. My thanks to Steve and to Andy. You can find further details of the union submissions and reactions to the recommendations of the Prison Service Pay Review Body by visiting poauk.org.uk, where you can also find information on the complete range of POA activities, plus how to join the union should you not already be a member. Thank you for listening. We hope you have enjoyed what you have heard and will join us for the next episode of the POA podcast. Thank you and goodbye.